Okay. There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. So if you joined me last week, right? Last week, yeah. Last week on Tuesday, then you have been knitting along with the Blue Caterpillar Shawlette knit along. And I made it through. Should get these out. Made it through the second color stripe or second stockinette section for my Blue Caterpillar Shawlette, so that I was all ready to do chart 3. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I chose to do based on the pattern. And you'll have to forgive my poor squishy pattern. But so this is what the Blue Caterpillar Shawlette looked like, the first one. Very blue, lots of blue. And I used a graduated color pack from Mountain Colors to make this blue one. And what I would do is I would kind of knit until my color was almost going to run out, because I never wanted to run out in the middle of a row. Usually I don't care, but because I had different colors, it made a difference. So I always made sure that I ended at an edge on one of my rows. So for the top portion, I clearly made it through like all of my light blue, and then started working my way into darker blues as I went down. Now, this version I'm doing in these 2 colors. So I don't have 5 colors, I only have 2 colors, and I don't have mini skeins, I have full skeins. So when I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do, I decided that all of my lace sections would be in dark green, and then my stockinette portions would be in the variegated green. So this is, see if I can stretch it a little bit. This is what it's looking like so far. It's not bad. So you can see I have chart 1 pretty much, the setup chart and chart 1 up here in the green section. And then I have a stockinette section, which I've done in the variegated. And then below that, I have my chart 2. So chart 2. And then I have another stockinette section where I've worked my way through another solid stripe. And it's coming together, and it's small right now because it is a shawlette. It's not meant to be a giant shawl. But we are going to add some length to this with chart 3. Now, the key to chart 3 is that you need to have taken all of your stitch markers out so that you can reset them for each different lace pattern, because you have different repeats for each lace chart. So that's an important distinction. And then when you look at chart 3, I have a note in the pattern that says to, where is it? There it is. Basically knit my chart like we've been doing. And then I'm going to knit the full chart once and then knit the full chart again, but I will have added 2 repeats, I think 2 repeats of my, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I will have added 2 repeats of this chart with each section, so each side. So 2 more repeats on each side of the central stitch. Hope that makes sense. That was kind of weird, wasn't it? Okay, you add 12 stitches, which gives you 2 more repeats, because this is a 6-stitch repeat on each side of the central stitch in your chart. So 4 total repeats, but because we think of it in 2 sections, that's how my brain works, is in sections. So when we do this, you can continue to add more if you want to. You can continue to add more repeats of this chart 3 if you have yarn left over, or if you want to make it longer, you can keep adding more repeats of this chart 3. It's totally up to you. I'm going to do 2 repeats and then see what it looks like. And then if I don't like it, or if I want more, then, and I know I'll have yarn left over, then I will probably go ahead and do a 3rd repeat, and then I will do the bind off. And the bind off is a picot bind off. So you bind off 6 stitches as you normally would, and then you put your stitch back over on your left hand needle and use a knitted on cast on to put 2 stitches onto your needle, so that you make tiny little picots, just itty bitty little bobbly edges to bind off on your blue caterpillar shawlette. So anyway, if anybody is having problems, now's the time to ask questions so that I can address you live. But if you aren't, then what I want to do is go ahead and talk about putting in your ends and setting up for your chart 3. So again, because I had 2 very distinct colors, I made sure I ended those on the edge, and you'll want to make sure that when you go to weave these in, that you weave them in on the same color so that you don't have contrast, and you make sure that you're hiding your ends well. If you're using a superwash like I did, you'll want to make sure that you, I would put my ends in at least 7 to 10 stitches, and always clip your ends short after you have washed and blocked your piece. So you can go ahead and like trim them. If they're really long, you can trim them down so they're only like 2 or 3 inches long before you throw them in your water and block your piece. But if you know, if you don't have a ton of tail left, just make sure that you have left your tail. Don't trim it flush with your piece until after you have blocked it, because your tails will move during that wash and block process, and I want to make sure that they don't pop out and then you have to trim them off again. And we don't want any holes. So that's my advice, is when you're switching those colors, always end on the edge. Make sure that you are weaving in your tail on the same color, not an opposite color, and make certain that you leave a little bit of tail sticking out when you go to wash and block your project. Don't clip it flush until it's dry. So there's all of my little tips for that. Now then, let's get into how I would set up for chart 3. So I know that I have my 5-stitch edge stitch, and then I'm just going to work my chart 3 all the way across to my center stitch. I'll knit 1, and then I'll work my chart 3 across again, and then I'll have my edge stitches. And I really like having stitch markers. Stitch markers, I think, are just vital for any kind of lace project. It really helps me to stay on track. And I put lace stitch markers in anywhere that I have those little blue bars on my charts. That's where I stick stitch markers, and I also put them at my edge stitch and my center stitch. And the reason that I do that is I need those little compartments, because it's much easier to count 6 stitches or 10 stitches than it is to count 20, 40, 60 stitches, right? It's much easier to count smaller numbers. So I put a ton of stitch markers in, and I know that might be a personal thing, but it really helps me when I am knitting lace, especially, to put tons of stitch markers in. And sometimes I have to move my stitch markers, and that's all right if you have to move your stitch markers, but I just find them really, really handy, really useful. And I am just using, hopefully you can see this, probably can't, these little textured stitch markers that we carry in the shop. Tina always likes to say, you know, your yarn over won't jump the stitch marker. And I have found that that's mostly true, but sometimes with my lace weights, I still have issues. So that's why I like to have small repeats to count, because it's really easy to see that I have 9 stitches instead of 10 versus, oh, I have like 35 stitches instead of 36. It's much harder to count those bigger numbers. So that's why I put lots of stitch markers in. Now, having said all of that, I am just going to reattach my dark green here. And I left in, when I was doing my stockinette sections, the edge stitch marker and the central stitch marker. So I'll show you that. So here's one of my little edge stitch markers, and it's very different. This is a very different stitch marker than the plain ones. And I do that, again, specifically so that I have a little note in my head that's like, well, that's different. Why is that different? Because you do something different there. So I know I have my 5 little edge stitches, and now I have a marker. Okay, I'm done with my edge. So now it's time to do my chart. So this one I'm going to yarn over and then put a stitch marker in, and then I'm going to knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches, and then put a stitch marker in again. And I'm going to set a stitch marker in every 6 stitches while I'm talking to you, all the way across the base of this, or this last row of this shawl that I'm working on. because I know that it's going to help me in the long run to make sure that I don't have any errors in my patterning when I'm working my way across. So, and the nice thing is with this one, the way that I have it written, you can actually leave your stitch markers in place if you decide to knit like a 3rd repeat or a 4th repeat, and you just add a couple more in. So that's a nice little thing. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes repeats, you know, they just don't work like that, and you end up having to move stitch markers. But for this one, it's nice because we can just keep our stitch markers where they are, and we just add some extras in on the edges and in the center. So that's all I'm doing, is I'm just knitting 6 stitches all the way across and making sure that I drop stitch markers in every 6 stitches, because that's also going to tell me if I have too many or too few stitches in my stockinette section. And I'm not gonna lie, if I have like too many, I'm probably just gonna decrease a stitch. If I have too few, I'll probably just make one, because you know, I had a stockinette section in this, so no one will notice. It's okay to cheat a little. That's like my best advice, is no one will notice. You can cheat a little. It's knitting. It's, you know, it's not the science that's going to take us to the moon, right? It's not life or death. I guess that's kind of what I want to say. It's not life or death. You will recover if you have, you know, a little boo-boo somewhere. And I am one that will often drop down and fix, you know, errors when I find them. But if it's just a missing stitch, I just make it up and move on. It's only if it really fundamentally alters the overall shape or placement of other motifs that I worry about it. Oh, I could have used more stitch markers. I'm going to run out. That's okay. I'll just get more out. 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, I'm just setting a stitch marker every 6 stitches. But I wanted to talk to you about this, which is why I don't have it already done. 4, 5, 6. So I know I don't have a lot of people watching, but how are we doing on our blue caterpillar shawlettes? Have you enjoyed knitting the blue caterpillar? Would you knit it again? I don't know. What else should I ask you? There's one. Put that one in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Perfect. I do need more stitch markers though. We'll see. I might have to start scrounging them from other bags. So I only have so many stitch markers in this one. That is something. I keep a little bag of things, a little bag of notions, I suppose, in all of my bags. I always keep things like, this was a gift, a cute little hedgehog bag that I adore. And I have like a couple pins in here. I have scissors. I have a tape measure that Ina hasn't stolen yet. I have a chibi with a bunch of tapestry needles in it. I have a little dab of dental floss, which I use as a lifeline. And I also have a hair tie just in case, because I have long hair and sometimes it irritates me. I keep stitch markers in here, usually a couple different kinds at least. And I keep one of those in every one of my project bags because it matters to me that I always have my, you know, my things that I need at hand. And sometimes you're traveling with those bags. If you don't put them in now, you may never, you know, you may not be able to finish a project, or you might get stuck and have to sit there with idle hands. So that is something that I always do, is I keep those little things in my project bag. So, and if you've just joined us, I am knitting 6 stitches and then placing stitch markers in all the way across my row for the first chart here. That is the disadvantage of these shawls that grow, is that they get bigger with every row. Darn it. So you have more stitches to work. It's very satisfying to start a triangular shawl because you see a lot of progress as you begin. But then it's less satisfying as you get into it because it's longer and longer rows to work. So I don't know. I can't decide if it's good or bad. I don't know. But I like my little triangular shawls. Although I tend to wear them backwards, more like a bandana than a shawl. But I think it was Tina that actually taught me that as well. So, anybody have questions? I missed what you're putting. Oh, what to put in my little bag? Oh, sure. I put all kinds of things in my little bag, but this one in particular has a tape measure. There's always a tape measure in my little bag. And scissors. There's always scissors in my little bag. And then some kind of tapestry needle, very important. I keep those tapestry needles in my little bag as well. And then I usually have a pen of some sort because a lot of times I need to mark, well, when I'm designing, I mark a lot of corrections on my papers, and then I have to go back and put them in, so I make sure that I write it down. And then I have just some little pieces of dental floss in this one. Usually I have like a little container of dental floss that I use for lifelines. And again, because I have long hair, I also have the hair tie, which is not really related to knitting, but it's related to my personal comfort. So that matters to me, so I do that. So anyway, all of those things are things that I keep in there, in addition to the stitch markers. And I actually had two different kinds in here. I'm using locking stitch markers right now only because I ran out of my little round textured ones, which I adore. We also sell, and these are kind of big for a locking stitch marker. I really like the thin ones, like the crochet pear-shaped ones a little bit better, because they're a little thinner and they just fit a little bit better. But for my purposes right now, I'm just going to go ahead and use these, and I can replace them later. It's really easy as you're working a row to replace stitch markers if you find that one is too fat or not working. But I love stitch markers, and it's really important to put stitch markers in when you're doing lace. Again, it's much easier to count 6 stitches than it is to count like 25 or 30. And I keep saying 6 stitches because this is only a 6-stitch repeat. That's why I'm putting a stitch marker in every 6 stitches. And it seems like overkill. If you wanted to, you could do every 12 stitches, I suppose. But for my brain and the way that it works, it's much easier if I just put stitch markers in every 6 stitches and make sure that I am trying to keep my poor little brain on track as much as possible. I don't know what it is, and I do love Ina, don't get me wrong. I wake up tired every day, even though like I'm trying to go to bed at a decent hour, try to get up at a decent hour, but I don't know, I'm just exhausted. Could be lots of things, probably not just Ina, but, and I am a worrier. I am definitely a worrier. I worry a lot, and so my brain runs like all the time. So even when I'm doing my lives, I'm thinking about lots of other things at the same time. So my brain never stops. Makes it really hard to go to sleep too. Anyway, stitch markers, really, really important when you're doing lace. Really, really helpful when you're doing lace. And again, I am setting them in this particular pattern where I have the blue lines. So I'm putting a stitch marker in every 6 rows, and look, I've run out of stitch markers again. So until I find more, we might have to just go with what we got. 4, 5, 6. It does take a lot of stitch markers. I do love stitch markers though. I'm a little bit of a collector hoarder of stitch markers. So let me see if I have one. This bag might have stitch markers in it. And again, here's my little go bag in a different project bag. I keep these all the time, and oh, lots of stitch markers. My stitch markers do tend to migrate back and forth as well because things like this happen, and I need more. So I borrow them and I put them in other things. And here's an adorable one. Tina actually made this. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little tiny crochet one. It's just a little crochet thread thing that she made. Super cute. Long time ago. Long time ago. There. Now I've got more stitch markers. Much better. So, and I do use all kinds of stitch markers, but again, I like to make sure that I'm being consistent. So when I am setting my stitch markers in, I try to keep all my stitch markers the same for certain repeats. And then I'll use special stitch markers that are different to mark my edge stitches as well as the center stitch. So, and it just depends a little bit on what the pattern looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and success! I've made it all the way across. All right, let me show you what this looks like. So here we are. Here's all of my many, many stitch markers. So you can see that I'm using a stitch marker every 6 stitches, and you can also see this one is very different. This is an edge stitch marker. It reminds me there's an edge here. I need to stop and do something different at this point. And then here's my center stitch. You can see that I've marked my center stitch on both sides with these 2 stitch markers here so that I know where my center stitch is at all times. It never wiggles. It's very clear where my center stitch is. It's not going to wander off to the side because I have forgotten it. And then again, that edge stitch over here, and you can see every 6 stitches I have marked it. Every 6 stitches all the way across, little stitch markers. This is how my brain works, and this is what makes it easier for me to make lace. Lots and lots of stitch markers. You don't have to have fancy stitch markers either. You can use like little bits of floss. You can use little twists of wire. The most important thing about your stitch markers is just that they don't catch on your yarn and they don't cause problems because they've snagged a row below or something of that nature. So, very, very important. And let's see. And do I have any questions? I don't think so. I think it was what was in your little bag. Nope. Okay, good. All right. So what you'll do is you will work your way all the way through this chart 3 now that you have your second stripe done. And then you're going to start at the beginning again and go all the way through. And what I said still holds true. Remember, we are adding 6 stitches here on each side of our little motif, which means that when we start this chart over, that we are going to be adding 2 repeats of the little motif on each side of our triangle. So we'll add 2 repeats on this side and 2 repeats on this side each time we finish the full chart. So as you're working, it's something to keep in mind. If you have extra yarn, or you want to throw another color on, you could do that too. Then you can do more repeats of that 3rd chart. You could do 3, 4, 5 repeats of that 3rd chart. Now the bind off might be a little bit trickier, but it should be pretty similar. I tried to math it so that it would still work even if you added extra repeats. And the only reason it's a little trickier is because I have those little picot bind offs. If you don't care about the little picots, you can skip them and just do a regular traditional bind off and go for it. I put the picot bind off in because I thought it was kind of cute to have these little bubbles along the edge. But if you don't want that, you don't have to put it in there. You can always change things in a pattern to suit you. I just kind of like the little bubble picot things, but again, totally up to you. Oh my goodness, how long have I been talking? Long enough. My heavens, that went fast. So anyway, when it comes to the blue caterpillar shawlette, now we should be into, or at least I'm into chart 3. As you move into chart 3, hopefully this will help you. I just think it's really important that no matter what you're doing when it comes to lace, you put lots of stitch markers in. You know what your chart is. It's really helpful to have highlighter tape because you can move that, or post-it notes. Highlighter tape I think is better because you can use it to either highlight the row you're on or mark above or below. But you know, it's just something I really like. We carry it in the shop because we really like the highlighter tape. But that's up to you. And it's also important to keep in mind how your pattern is written. So the way that I have mine written is it has your edge stitches, you have a chart that you're working from, you have a center stitch, you have the chart you're working from, and then you have edge stitches. Because you're pretty much always doing the same thing with your edge stitches. You just knit 5, whether it's on the right side or the wrong side. And then with the center stitch, you always knit it on the front side and purl it on the back side. So, you know, it's there, but it's not as important as understanding the pattern stitches. And that's where your chart comes in. So hopefully all of that has helped you in your journey with the Blue Caterpillar Shawlette. And if you have specific questions, you can, of course, drop me a comment on this post, or you can send me a message through the Facebook page or an email, either way, and I will try to do my best to answer them. Although I am super busy right now because the slow yarn crawl is coming up, and I am trying to get all the patterns set for the slow yarn crawl so that we can get the photographs in them, so that I can get them all back to the shop, so that they can do the tech editing, so that I can put them all up on Ravelry. Yeah, so that we can start the slow crawl in May, because there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes for all those yarn crawls that, you know, a lot of people don't know about, but there's a lot of work that goes into those. So anyway, I am heavy in the midst of all of that, and as well as, you know, starting all the seeds for my garden, and then I have the 2-year-old, and I'm trying to hatch a couple of duck eggs, and what else do I have going on? I'm trying to update the guidebook for my rabbit club, and you know, there's just lots of stuff that goes on every day. So anyhow, if you have more questions, feel free to drop me a line. I'll do my best to answer them, but right now I'm like on a 2-day lag getting my email answered, so I'll just warn you now what's kind of happening. Sometimes I can get to it faster. It depends on how much Ina sleeps for me and how much she lets me work on the laptop without shutting it. So yeah, I love my daughter. I love my daughter. Love my daughter. Anyway, so that's what's going on there. But hopefully I will start to see some finished Blue Caterpillar Shawlette photos. Don't forget that they do qualify for our year of self-care. Anything that you're working on, whether it's knitting, crochet, tatting, spinning, weaving, needle lace, bobbin lace, dyeing. I'll take dyeing. It's fiber and needle arts related. Why not? Throw a picture up, tag it year of self-care, tell your friends about it. Because we are picking one winner every month, and we are tailoring our prize to the winners. So we're sending you stuff that you actually want. Like Terry Oda was last month's winner, and I said, you know, what do you want? I gave her some choices, and she picked a gift certificate, and she got a Sashiko kit, and she is super happy. She's already working on it because it was something that she really wanted. So we are trying to make sure that our prizes are fun and geared towards whatever you work with. So anyway, that's my spiel for now. Make sure you check out Black Sheep Fiber Emporium. Make sure that you are following our page, follow our YouTube channel, follow our TikTok channel, follow our Instagram channel. We try to be everywhere. And that you're putting up those year of self-care photos and tagging Black Sheep Fiber Emporium so that we can find them and get you entered. Remember, you can enter as many times as you want every month, whether that's once, twice, 600 times. I'm going to count all of those, and they all count. So, and I use a random number generator to pick our winner. So you always have a decent chance because, you know, random number generator. So make sure that you are sharing that with your friends, that you're following along with our year of self-care, and I want to see your Blue Caterpillar Shawlettes, even if they're green. So it's the green Caterpillar Shawlette. Anyway, I will see you all Monday for our final history of lace chit chat, and then don't forget I'm missing Wednesday next week because they're replacing the crown that fell off. Like the whole crown just bloop, fell off. I think the cement must have been bad or something. I don't know exactly what happened there. And then I won't be back until the following Wednesday, but remember, I do put the events up on Black Sheep Fiber Emporium, so you can always click that you're going or interested so that you get a little reminder on Facebook that day. And I do go live Mondays and Wednesdays almost every week at about 3 o'clock Central Time with Black Sheep Fiber Emporium, and I do all kinds of things. We do spinning and weaving and tatting and knitting, and I need to do some crochet and some embroidery because it's been a while. Anyway, I hope to see you all there, and even if I don't, please share your photos and make sure you tag us so that I can find them. All right, I will see you all next week. Bye.